Hello, and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and today we're taking a look at some upside chasing transfer plans, which I'm eyeing up across the next 4 weeks before the following international break. But before we get started, if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And if you do like the following content, hit that like button because algorithms and stuff, right? So, last week I did a video called Sun Set to Become Essential, which garnered a little bit of interest, one of which was a comment last week on the video saying that Sun set to become essential is so knee-jerk and premature. They play Arsenal and Liverpool coming up. Now, interesting comment. My response to that was, in what situation would you find a player that you see playing well, like really well, scoring a hat-trick, and not use the term knee-jerk to put that player into your squad? And does that mean that you will always have to wait a few weeks watching that player score more points week on week before you put them into your team? Now, I understand where the knee-jerk term comes from, especially in this case. I mean, Son last year came off the bench and scored a hat-trick and then basically did nothing else for the rest of the season as a result. But last year is quite different to what's going on this year. My thoughts around Son specifically are that Conte ruined him. Do not rate Conte as a manager at all. And since then he's had interim managers who potentially didn't have the skill set to get the best out of Son. However, Postecoglou is now in charge of Spurs, is a very good manager, and is playing some very attacking football. And what has changed with Son is Richarlison has been playing in that number 9 role, and he's been wank. Like, he has not been good. 2 videos ago, I said I had sat down to watch the Spurs game, thought Richarlison had a string of poor performances, and that he was destined for the bench. Last week, well, not last week, but in the last Premier League fixture, he was in fact benched. Son was played in the number 9 position instead, scored a hat-trick, Spurs looked amazing, they won 5-2. So, I'm not going to cover all the detail of the points that I went through last video, because you can go and check that if you are at all interested. But to touch on a couple of notes that are important on deciding whether or not to get Son into your teams is they play Sheffield United at home this week, which is probably a better fixture than Burnley away, which is where Son got his hat-trick. Son is a clinical finisher. We've seen this over many, many seasons, and he uses both of his feet, which actually makes him really hard to defend against for centre-backs. When he's out on the wing, it's pretty obvious that he's going to want to cut in and start heading towards goal, so you kind of know what he's going to do, but when he's smack bang in front of goal, he could go left or right, and it's actually a nightmare to mark. Spurs have no midweek fixtures to worry about at all. Son is probably on penalties. I went into a bit of a deep dive on penalty analysis in the video last week. If you want to see how I arrived at this decision, you can check that out in that video. But I'm guessing he's probably on pens, with Maddison probably the second most likely penalty taker in the team. At the time of recording last week, which was basically straight after the close of fixtures, Son was at 8.8% ownership in the game. He's risen by 2% across the week So not really a hell of a lot of investment yet, meaning he's still down at 10.8% ownership. So if he does haul or go mad against Sheffield United and you have him in your team, you're going to eat all those points and get ahead of the competition. If you are inclined to go against Haaland as a captaincy option this week, not that I am recommending that you should, but if you are that way inclined, Son is probably near the top of the list of alternative captains this week, meaning he has probably got the best looking fixture on paper. And if he does in fact haul for a second game in a row, his ownership's going to go through the roof, even though they do have Arsenal and Liverpool coming up, which is part of the comment that I read earlier about it's pretty knee-jerk to be bringing him in ahead of those two fixtures. But if you look a little bit forward into game week 8, I am probably going to be going against Haaland as a captaincy when Haaland is playing Arsenal away, and Spurs play Luton that week away. Luton are currently my whipping boys. They are my top choice for wooden spoon, and probably wooden spoon by a relatively big margin. They are way out of their depth in the Premier League, and I think Spurs will have an absolute field day against them in game week 8. So if you do jump on early and he does do well, you will also get all of those price rises across the next couple of game weeks. Now, on the next couple of game weeks, they play Arsenal and Liverpool. But there are some other things to consider here. In game week 6 versus Arsenal, Arsenal are smack bang in the middle of two midweek fixtures. So just before Arsenal play Spurs, they've got PSV in the Champions League midweek, and then straight after, in the midweek before game week 7, they play Brentford away in the EFL Cup third round. So I suspect Arteta is going to prioritise that PSV game. It'll probably be a bit of a tough game, and Arsenal will probably be a little bit leggy in that game week 6 fixture. Shouldn't affect them too much, but Spurs obviously have the whole week to rest and prepare for this game, and I think they're going to give Arsenal a really tough game. I don't see this game as like a 0-0 or a 1-1. I think it's probably going to consist of maybe 3 or even 4 goals in that match, and I think Spurs will probably score in that game, maybe even score 2 goals and nab it off Arsenal, considering the other commitments that Arsenal have. Similarly, in game week 7, when they play Liverpool, Liverpool have midweek fixtures either side of game week 7 as well. They are a lot kinder than what Arsenal have to go up and face, but I don't think Liverpool is quite as strong of a team as Arsenal. But Liverpool have Leicester midweek just before game week 7, that would be in the EFL Cup, and then they have a Europa fixture straight after game week 7 in midweek before game week 8. So there's a lot of reasons to be looking at bringing Son into your teams. Now, for me, what I discussed last week was a couple of weeks ago I made 2 transfers. I've only made 2 transfers in my team all season so far, and those 2 transfers were to sell Rashford just before his Nottingham Forest fixture to bring in Foden. And I was doing that in order to gain funds to put Trippier into my squad because Gabriel was still sitting there and was obviously out of favour, and I was almost certainly going to lock Trippier in for the long haul. Now, what's changed in the 2 weeks since I bought them is I've sat down and watched Newcastle in both fixtures against Liverpool and last week against Brighton, and Trippier is not getting forward. So in that Liverpool fixture, Van Dijk got sent off at around the 20-odd minute mark. So Liverpool were down to 10 men. Newcastle were winning 1-0 at that point. So they were playing against 10 men for 70-odd minutes of that match, and Trippier was basically rooted to the right-back spot. That is not at all what we saw him doing last season when he got his 198 points. He was marauding forward, getting involved in a lot of the attack. He's still on all the set pieces, or a big majority of all the set pieces, and so his stats this season will still be looking relatively strong because those will be accumulating small XA or expected goal involvement chances, but he is just not getting forward. And for the second most expensive defender in the game, you kind of want him getting up the pitch, kind of like a Chilwell, 5.5 million, a million cheaper, but playing left wing, even though he's only on for about 60 to 70 minutes. Still way more happy to have Chilwell in your squads than Trippier. So what I am now looking at is Trippier out, all the way down to someone like a Botman, assuming that he is fit and ready. He is back in training, and so I think we will hear from Eddie Howe that he'll be fit and ready for the game at the weekend. And that will give me a couple of million to spend, which will be more than enough to upgrade Foden back up to a 9 million asset in Son, just before Man City obviously also run into their sets of midweek fixtures, and we will see a little bit of rotation crop up in the Man City outfit. Now, whether or not Foden is actually the man that gets rotated, I'm not entirely sure. I think he's probably still first choice and will probably still get the majority of minutes, but I do not want to sell Salah, Saka, Maddison or Mbeumo. Foden is my upside chasing spot, and given the fact that he has a little bit of rotation risk upcoming, I am more than happy to sell him to jump on someone like a Son Heung-min. Now, that's obviously specific to my team, and my team is quite different to most other teams. Well, the template is quite different. A lot of people out there will have either Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, or Sterling as the main potential makeways in their squads for a Son if they are considering to get Son. Now, Sterling, if he is in your team, is probably going to be a bit of a hard sell, because I am imagining that you've only just bought Sterling in due to his haul the week prior, and so you'd brought him in, he's blanked, he could have actually easily scored some points in that match, and he has a good set of fixtures moving forward, and so looking to sell him for a Son move looks like you're doubling down on a knee-jerk potential move. Now, I swerved Sterling because I do not at all rate Chelsea's attack at the moment. I watched them play that Luton game in which Sterling did do very well. What I noticed was Luton were terrible, and Chelsea struggled to break them down. And so I thought, well, if they're struggling against probably the worst team in the league, even though they have a very kind run of fixtures, I do not see a whole bunch of hauls coming for Sterling. Sterling would have been the only man from Chelsea that I would have been looking to bring in that midfield. So if you are sitting there with Sterling, I would give serious consideration to looking to bring in Son if you can afford it, but I do also understand that the fixtures mean that Sterling probably will nab a few points along the way. I just think Son has a much higher ceiling. Rashford is probably the other spot who I sold a couple of weeks ago, and I would still recommend taking a look at this because I do not like Rashford's next 4 fixtures. So if I just bring in some of the main teams that we will be looking at here. So across the next 4 game weeks, which is up until the next international break, Man United play Brighton at home this week. Now, I know the narrative at the moment is Brighton have conceded in every single game and do not have a great XG. If we just bring them in, what's their XG at? XGC, sorry. 8.47. So yeah, compared to someone like Arsenal, 3.75, Brighton do look like they are giving up a lot of opportunities, and I do get that narrative. But if we take a look at the United squad, ordered by position, we've got Anthony out. He won't be playing this weekend. Mount injured. Amrabat, who we've just purchased, injured. Ahmad Mainu, probably not too big of a deal. Shaw is still out injured. Rafael Varane is out injured. Martinez is still down as injured with a 75% chance of playing. Okay, so maybe he does come in. But Manchester United have a lot of injuries. Even without those injuries, they have not been performing very well. I've been watching Manchester United, and they are not playing spectacular football. It's been a little bit of a hard watch. And how we look to line up this weekend is kind of anyone's guess. I think we'll probably find Højlund starting up front, maybe for his first start. I don't know. Maybe Martial still nabs that spot. Rashford could play on the left, and they could play Pellistri out on the right. They could also play Bruno Fernandes out on the right, or maybe they move Rashford across to the right and look to play Garnacho on the left. Garnacho has had a couple of starts earlier in the season on the left wing, but he hasn't been setting the world alight. Another point to mention is Anthony does a lot of defensive work, and considering he won't be playing, he won't be shielding the United defence too much, which means if you add all of this together, I don't know how much of the ball we're actually going to have in this game, and Brighton are looking devastating in their opening fixtures. That game last week against Newcastle, I thought Newcastle played well, but Brighton just played them off the park. Newcastle were lucky to score in that game, and they lost 3-1. My score prediction this weekend for United v Brighton is Brighton win 2-0 or 3-0. So if you are holding on to a Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, maybe have a little think about how you think that Manchester United game is going to go down this weekend, especially with all the stuff going off the pitch as well. It is not the ideal set of circumstances to be coming up against the highest XG generating team across the first 4 game weeks. So those are the 3 main candidates that you'll probably be looking at for transfers in for Son, and that's mostly my points. The other final point is people are still worried about Richarlison coming back to play in the number 9 role, which would see Son switch back out to left wing. I've got like an eyelash in my eye, which is kind of a little bit annoying there. I don't see any need for worry about this. That seems like a narrative is just being construed in order to defend not buying Son. So if we look at what's happened, the first 3 game weeks, Richarlison has been horrible. He was pretty bad pre-season as well, but in the first 3 Premier League fixtures, it just was not working. Postecoglou switches up the team to try and give Richarlison a little bit of reprieve, maybe try him in some of the easier midweek fixtures to see if he can get back into the swing of things, and put Son up front, and what happens? Son absolutely smashes it and gets a hat-trick. Is that a good reason to go, oh, well, that worked really well, let's bring Richarlison back in and see if we can just have another go at him? Yes, they do have an easy game against Sheffield United this week, but then they go into Arsenal and Liverpool away. Now, Postecoglou will be doing everything in his power to get the first 11 absolutely humming to have a good chance at pulling away some points from the likes of Arsenal and Liverpool in game week 6 or 7. So is he going to Hail Mary it with Richarlison and Sheffield United to see if he can somehow pull it together and then look to play at Richarlison against Arsenal in game week 6? Or is he going to go with his best goal scorer in the team, who is now captain and has just shown that he can absolutely smash it? Okay, so you can probably see where I'm leaning here. I am almost 90 to 95% certain that Son's going to start in the number 9 position up front. Richarlison maybe gets a little bit of a run out after like the 75-80 minute mark if Spurs are humming, and it maybe chucks him up front. Or potentially Postecoglou looks at playing him in an alternative position like that left wing spot that Son has left vacant. However, Solomon actually did do quite well there last week, and I don't see Richarlison starting over Solomon. I think he will probably just roll out the exact same team that started against Burnley and then try to work Richarlison in off the bench, either in left wing or up front, depending on game state when it's late into the match. So my transfer plans for this week is Trippier out for Botman or Burn, potentially a Matty Cash, but I do not think I'll be going to Aston Villa this week. I think I'll wait a couple of weeks before I go there, as I think I probably want to eye up Moreno as instead of Matty Cash. So I would like to delay jumping on Aston Villa a couple of weeks if I can, and if I can do so. But yeah, on the Trippier thing, I do know a lot of people are looking to bring Trippier in. A lot of these teams are solo premium setups where they do have a lot of cash to splash about. I think Trippier is still a relatively good option. I think he's overpriced at the moment for what he is doing, but if you do have the cash to splash, he is a fine asset to own, especially considering the defense has been pretty lackluster across the first 4 game weeks. However, I do suspect that Howe has changed the responsibilities that he's putting on Trippier, probably because of all the midweek fixtures that are coming up. I think Howe wants to play Trippier as often as he possibly can, i.e. I think he wants to play him midweek, weekend, midweek, weekend, midweek, weekend, as often as he can, because he offers a lot to the Newcastle team, especially with his set-piece delivery. But in order to do that, I think Howe has said, all right, in order for you to play all these midweek matches, you don't have to get as far forward up the pitch. And I think that's probably why Trippier might be getting stuck in that right-back position and not actually marauding up the pitch like he used to do in the past. Now, if that is an accurate assessment, and I'm not saying it is, it's just a hypothetical that I am putting forward, but if Trippier has been told you no longer get forward because we need to save your legs for the midweek games, I think the points that Trippier will pull in versus a Botman, well, we'll just go versus a Botman rather than a Burn, because Botman is my key target, is probably only going to be about 3 points across the next 4 game weeks. I think Trippier might nab a cheeky assist off a set-piece delivery across the next 4 game weeks, but apart from that, Botman will probably do relatively well on the bonus points in any fixture where Newcastle come away with like a 1-0 type result, or even a 0-0 type result, which, given the fixtures, I think Newcastle should probably score 2 or 3 goals in most of the upcoming fixtures, and so potentially Botman doesn't get a hell of a lot of bonus points, but he does do relatively well on the bonus in those low scoring clean sheet games, and I do not see the 2 million excess outlay for Trippier as being, well, really worth it. I think putting that 2 million back into midfield to jump on a Son gives me a much higher potential ceiling for those for that extra 2 million. Now, looking a little bit forward, once I put that 9 million spot back in the middle of the park, and it does open up some alternative options across the next 4 game weeks. So if I just drop this down to the next 6 game weeks and we just look at the next 4. Now the reason I'm kind of looking at the next 4 game weeks as opposed to a longer term view is everyone who doesn't own Salah is looking to wildcard in game week 8 or 9 in order to jump on a Salah. I already have Salah in my team, and so I need to make sure that I'm kind of lining up my squad to look relatively similar to what the wildcard team will look like in game week 8 or 9. And so at the moment, I think my team, apart from the bench and the keepers, is relatively close to what a lot of wildcards will probably look like. I haven't overinvested in Chelsea, and people will be jumping off Chelsea. Saka may be a sacrificial lamb on a wildcard. I don't know how many people will jump on João Pedro, but I am still holding on to João Pedro for a whole bunch of reasons, which I'm not going to go into on this video. But the rest of it, I think, is relatively close. So the wildcard's probably going to have Haaland, Salah, a Son / Maddison, or both. The Saka spot will probably be a Rashford, and then you'll have someone like an Mbumo, Diaby, or maybe even probably a Matoma by that point, because the Brighton fixtures do turn for the better after the next 5 game weeks. The next 5 game weeks look a little bit tough, and then it gets really nice for Brighton after that point. So I think my team, assuming João Pedro gets 4 starts out of 5 across the next 5 game weeks, I think a lot of people will start to consider a João Pedro on their wildcard when they're looking to bring in Salah if they are going for the 2 premium setup, because you will need a cheap player in there somewhere. So my upside chasing plans for the next couple of game weeks is Son and Botman in this week, assuming Botman is fit. Then in game week 6, the main worry point is Rashford, which is away to Burnley. But outside of the Burnley fixture across the next 4 game weeks, I do not really like Rashford for the next 4 game weeks. Brighton, like I said, I think they're going to lose 2-0 or 3-0. Crystal Palace is going to be a tough game, and depending on how many injuries we still have by then, if we've managed to turn it around, maybe Rashford does all right there. Brentford have been amazing in the first 4 game weeks, and so that's going to be a really tough game. And so I don't see huge hauls coming out of the likes of Rashford or Fernandes across the next 4 game weeks. So the question is, do I want to go Son in this week? So I've got that £9 million spot, and then look at potentially selling Son to Rashford in game week 6 for the Burnley fixture, and then to jump back on Son either in game week 7 or game week 8. I have to get Son back in game week 8 for Luton. Or do I just bring Son in, keep him for the Arsenal and Liverpool fixtures, which is the path that I am most leaning towards, and then just forego the Burnley fixture for Rashford, because the only other player that I've got in my squad in order to jump on a Rashford is Saka, down at 8.6 million, I think I sell him for at the moment. But Saka has Bournemouth at home that game week, followed by Aston Villa away, and so I don't think I will be doing the Saka move either. So it looks like, to me, Rashford is just kind of dead and buried, which means in game week 7 I should have 2 free transfers to play around with. Now there are a couple of problems potentially in my squad, one of which is Turner and Johnston both could potentially lose their places. I'm more of the mind that I'm just going to play them until they lose their places and not pre-transfer them, because it's a very low ceiling transfer to be transferring a goalkeeper, unless of course you're bringing in a goalkeeper for some sort of double game week. But the other team high on my list of potentially good attacking prowess is in an outside shout is Aston Villa and Diaby. And so potentially I jump on a Diaby at some point over the next coming game weeks. But I am playing around with the idea of going Son in, Son out the following week for Rashford. We will see what happens this game week to see whether or not that's viable. To just miss that Arsenal game, and then potentially selling Rashford almost instantly again to bring in Son back for the Liverpool fixture. Now, these are some of the things that you should probably be thinking about if you are intending to wildcard in game week 8 or 9, because transfers aren't quite as precious for you guys. You can hokey-cokey jump around because you're going to completely overhaul your squad in a few game weeks, and targeting those high upside fixtures could be a decent play. The other set of fixtures that we could potentially look at jumping on is, of course, Man City in game week 6 and 7, Nottingham Forest at home and Wolves away. They look like two prime fixtures. However, we will need to see what kind of rotation comes into the team with those midweek fixtures coming up for Man City. So that's kind of the tentative transfer plans that are floating around in my mind as to what I am likely to do across the next 4 game weeks running up into the next international break. Now, the other thing that has come up since the last video is there is a double game week that has been announced in game week 7. There's also a blank that has been announced for Man City and Brentford, but that's not until about game week 18, so that's miles away and not worth worrying about at this point in time. But for this double game week of Luton and Burnley, I've got down here as my first point, this is actually a hard avoid for me. I do not anticipate investing any transfers into Luton or Burnley for a couple of reasons. Both of these teams, well, I've seen Luton play and they are going to struggle in the Premier League. Like I've said, I think they'll probably be 20th come the end of the season. What are we really hoping for in an Everton away fixture or followed by a Burnley at home for Luton? Are we expecting Luton to score 4 goals in those 2 games? I doubt it. I think Everton will probably put up a pretty strong pretty strong defence there. They will know that's a very important game. Everton were flirting with relegation last year, and they know that this game against Luton is going to be crucial. Similarly, the Burnley fixture will play like a 6-point fixture in which it will be extremely important for both teams to come away with points there, and so we could see like a 0-0, 1-0 type situation. So from a defensive point of view, I don't think we should be wasting any transfers on getting in any Luton or Burnley defenders for this double specifically, unless you already have them on your bench. I have Kabore. I also have Woodrow from Luton, but he's a 4.5 million non-playing striker, or he might come on for like the last 5-10 minutes of a match. Kabore missed the last match. I'm unsure why. I do not intend to play Kabore at all, and I do not think I would put him in front of a Botman, a Stupinan, or Chilwell, even for a double game week, as I suspect they will concede in both games. They could potentially concede 2 goals in each of those games, maybe, and the chance of him getting any attacking output is severely low. Now, on the Burnley front, I haven't really watched Burnley at all, to be fair, so I'm not entirely certain what that team is looking like. But they have to play Newcastle away as part of that double up, and of course Luton away, which will play out either like a 0-0 or potentially a 1-0. Either way, I think it's a high gamble to be spending a transfer to bring in Luton or Burnley players in order to play them over one of your probably much better assets that you already own in your team, and then have to look at transferring them out. Now, if you're transferring them out on a wildcard, yep, I can kind of see that, but who are you going to play a Morris over in this double? I suppose Jackson or someone like that. I think Jackson probably has a better chance at scoring more points than a Morris up front, but I guess we will have to wait and see. So, that's it for the video. Now, if you did enjoy this video and got something out of it, press the like button and consider subscribing. It really does help the channel out. And until next time, I will catch you again shortly. Cheers.